This man spent 438 days in the open ocean without food supplies or drinking water. How did he do it? Did he succeed? Get comfortable, friends, because this is terrifying. Jose Salvador Alvarenga, who was at least as experienced, if not even more experienced than he was himself. But that day, for unknown reasons, his friend couldn't take his shift. Jose didn't want to refuse work, but he also didn't want to catch sharks alone. So he asked the management which of the other fishermen from the company could join him, but it turned out no one could. Well, almost no one. It's not that people in the team had anything against Jose or anything like that. It's just that the only one who was free that day was a super inexperienced young man, 23-year-old Ezekiel Cordoba. After hesitating a bit, Jose agreed, and on November 17th, 2012, he ended up taking the shift together with Ezekiel. That day, they set out from the village of Costa Azul, Mexico, sailing 74.565 miles away from the shore. It's important for you to understand that they sailed 74.565 miles from the shore in a small 7-meter boat which had no roof or even any kind of cabin to hide from the sun if needed. And as for technical equipment, there was only a radio on board for communication with the shore and a cooler for storing fish. And importantly, they also had a knife. At first, everything went well, as it often does in similar stories. The men barely had time to pull the new catch out of the water, but soon the weather began to change rapidly. The fishermen realized that an intense storm, not just ordinary rain, was approaching. But despite this, they simply continued fishing. They wanted to earn more and thought they would have time to escape before it hit them, the storm. But everything changed too quickly. At some point, Jose and Ezekiel realized there was nowhere left to run. They were just in the middle of the storm, but it should be noted that they didn't panic. They held on and thought it would all be over soon. They just had to wait a couple more hours and they would be heading home with a huge catch. But the storm was only gaining strength and eventually lasted 120 hours. So the men were tossed about on huge waves for a full 5 days. During this time, of course, they tried to get out of the storm and even threw back into the ocean nearly half a ton of fish they had caught earlier. The boat was too heavy for its small engine to pull the men out of the grip of the storm, so they did everything they could to reduce its weight. In their panic, they also threw some of their equipment overboard, but even that didn't save the motorboat. No longer able to fight the elements, it simply stalled and wouldn't start again. Jose had a radio, and of course he used it, got in touch with his supervisor, and asked him to send someone for help. After that, the radio's battery died. A rescue team was sent, but after 2 days of searching in rather difficult conditions, they were unable to find any traces of Jose or Ezekiel. Well, that's not surprising. It's unlikely the rescuers could have guessed that the small boat had drifted 279 miles away from the coastline into the open ocean. And since the fishermen stopped making contact, the rescue operation was called off after a few days. It would seem that fishing has something to do with information technology. So Jose and Ezekiel found themselves in the middle of the Pacific Ocean without any means of communication or the ability to control the boat. They didn't have any oars or even an anchor to at least stay in one place. So, after the storm ended, the wind kept pushing them further into the ocean. It was the 6th day since the men had set off from the shore, and almost all the food supplies they had taken with them for what they thought would be a 30-hour trip had already been eaten. Realizing that rescue could take a long time, like a really long time, the fishermen, in order not to starve, started catching small fish and birds, which they ate raw. And to quench their thirst, they collected rainwater in plastic bottles they had fished out of the water. But don't throw bottles into the water, and sometimes they drank turtle blood, or actually urine. Every day they hoped that today someone would rescue them, that someone would sail up to them, or that they would reach someone or some island. But nothing changed. Beyond the boat, there was only the endless ocean, and one day replaced another, turning into weeks and months. They weren't having fun. According to Jose, about 4 months after losing contact with the outside world, his young companion lost the last thing that had kept him going all this time: hope. With each passing day, Ezekiel fell deeper into depression and, in addition, felt physically worse due to constantly eating only raw food. He had stomach pains and felt unwell, though Jose was digesting everything more or less okay. One way or another, in the end, Ezekiel decided not to eat anything at all. He understood that this meant only one thing, death, but he just didn't want to fight anymore. Before his death, he made Jose promise not to eat his flesh. For the first few days after Ezekiel fell asleep for the last time, Jose kept wandering, or rather drifting, with his body. Moreover, he even talked to him. As strange as it may sound, Jose didn't want to be truly alone. As you can imagine, the atmosphere on the boat was not the best for anyone's mental health. Jose was no exception, and even thought about death. But still, he didn't do it. He said that his faith in God and his fear of hell saved him. About a week later, Jose was collecting the body of a former friend. He realized that if he stayed in his company any longer, he would simply lose his mind. From that moment on, he stayed alone in the boat and continued to drift across the ocean. But did no one really pass by his boat all this time? They did. During the next 6 months of drifting in the ocean, Jose saw quite a few transoceanic container ships, but he simply couldn't signal for help. Well, the kind that would have been noticed. He shouted, waved his arms, but of course, it was all in vain. Once, a cargo ship passed by him with 4 men on board, and they were close enough to notice him. And they noticed him, but they just kept moving on. Jose, of course, was deeply affected by this, in the worst sense of the word. But still, he tried not to lose hope and continued his journey in a tiny boat across the vast ocean. Truthfully, he had little choice. He tracked time by observing the moon's phases, and when his count reached the 15th lunar cycle, he couldn't believe his eyes. He saw green coconut palms in the distance. Ahead of him was land. It was an island. And when Jose was close enough to it, he just jumped straight into the water and swam to the shore. When he reached it, he just immediately passed out on the beach. He fell and passed out. As it turned out later, Jose was thrown out on the southernmost atoll of the Marshall Islands called Ebon. Fortunately, the man ended up in a rather favorable spot on the island, as he soon noticed signs of civilization, a solitary hut on a neighboring island. These islands are so close to each other that their inhabitants can simply shout to one another like, "Hey, what's up over there? How was your day today?" and so on. That's exactly what Jose did. When he saw a couple coming out of a small house on the neighboring island, he started shouting and waving his arms as hard as he could, trying to get their attention. The couple, understandably, got a little scared, but still approached Jose, and in broken English and with gestures, they asked him to kneel. Jose immediately did as they asked. After that, the couple took him to their home, let him take a shower for the first time in a year, gave him clothes, since he was practically naked, and food, which Jose immediately devoured. But the now 37-year-old Jose wasn't just tormented by hunger, he also craved communication, having not spoken to anyone for a very long time. Initially, he babbled in Spanish, a language no one on the island understood at all without holding back. The couple soon informed local authorities about Jose. The island's mayor assembled a team to handle the situation. They inspected the man's boat, which was found near the island, and saw a live bird inside, which was tied by its leg. And also bird remains, bones, feathers, and the shell of a small turtle, which was used as a drinking cup. Unable to explain his identity or origins verbally, Jose drew on a piece of paper with a marker they provided. But what he drew didn't make sense to the people around him. They simply didn't believe it was possible. Because if what Jose was trying to explain was true, it meant that he had traveled between 9,000 and 1162 miles across the Pacific Ocean in his small boat, and the journey itself lasted 438 days. Jose also asked for a phone to call his family, but he was denied. The mayor was afraid that he was not the person he claimed to be. She contacted the police and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the capital, Matsuru, to help her resolve the situation. For the next 5 days, Jose stayed on Ebon. After that, he was transferred to Matsuru, where he was finally identified. Everyone was in shock. He spent 11 days in the hospital and eventually set off for Salvador, his hometown, to reunite with his family. It seemed like this was just another wonderful rescue story. But there were many questions for Jose, which probably some of you also had. If so, write in the comments which ones exactly. The emphasis was mainly on the fact that under such conditions the man was in, a person should have at least gotten scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency. In Ukraine, this vitamin is practically unavailable. Besides, not everyone believed that Ezekiel simply decided to die of hunger, especially his family members, who later went to court with Jose. However, numerous interrogations and investigations into Jose's survival confirmed the truthfulness of his story. Moreover, he could get vitamin C from turtle meat. But when it comes to Ezekiel, it's more interesting. He could have done anything he wanted with him. The only question is that it's impossible to prove. No way, yes. Dear ones, if you watched this video up to this very second, know that you are the best. I absolutely adore you and really appreciate that you watch my channel. Keep faith in yourself. Everything will be fine. I promise and guarantee it. I believe it. This was Vusanya with you. Please, also check out this video and this one. They are really awesome. The woman here is just out of this world. Seriously, check it out. It's great. See you next week. Bye.